Exercise 10, AutoCAD 2025. What we're taking a look at today is actually importing an old DWG file from a different CAD system, and it's two-dimensional, and changing it to 3D. Now you could do this technically with any DWG file, 2D WG file, as long as it comes over clean and has watertight boundary conditions. So let's take a look at this. We're going to go ahead and build what you see here. It's just like a wheel, and it's based off of this drawing that we're going to import. And so it's really not importing, I suppose, because it is a DWG, which is the native format of AutoCAD, but this one is from a different system. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Open and select my DWG. And it's going to just let us know that this was not created by an Autodesk product. So it comes from outside source. Are you sure you want to open it? Yes, in this case. All right, and here we could see the geometry comes over. I specifically changed some of the colors of it so it was easier to see. And we have a wheel and we have some dimensions. There's some cutouts in there. We see an isometric view up in the upper right corner, and then we see the section view based off the center. Now you can see the top part of the section view actually has a pocket in it, or a hole, for this opening. The bottom actually is a nice clean cut through, so there's no interference. So theoretically, if we go ahead and take this and utilize that as a revolve, we should be in good shape. So first of all, what you want to make sure you want to do is right click on any icon. And I'm saying right click, go to show tabs, and make sure visualize, as well as you could turn on parametric. We don't really need it today, I suppose. And we're looking for solid. Make sure that those are turned on. Now, what we're going to do is also, there are layers in here. So if we go home here and we go to the layers, we should be able to see the layers. And mine's cut off a little bit off the screen, but if you click on number 4, the light bulb, you'll see that will take away the cross-hatching that was in there. So that's pretty much all we had to do just to clean that up a bit. And now it's a little bit hard to see, so what we can do is we can click and drag a fence to surround the geometry, and then hover over it and right mouse button click and go to Properties. Again, mine's cut off on the bottom of the screen here, so just go to the Properties tab, and it should bring over this, and we'll set that color to just something that's easier to see. I'll just set mine to white. You can change it to any color you prefer. And now I'm going to hit Escape. All right, so that's the geometry we want to use. Now, if we just use it as is, it is watertight, but the problem is that it will come out as a collection of surfaces, and that's not what we want. We actually want it to be one continuous solid. So what I would recommend doing first is go to Modify and find the Join command. Now click and drag a fence to surround just that geometry. Click again and hit Enter, and you'll see 17 objects converted to one polyline. So we're in good shape. Now, if you want to go into 3D here, just make sure you're in 3D modeling in case your system was not set up that way. And then you could go to like an isometric view here, click on the house. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this geometry and revolve it around this blue line. Now for that blue line, just make sure that your filters are turned on for endpoints, like up here, so that we could select that blue line. And now let's go ahead and go to the, you could either go into the home or solids area, and you'll find revolve. Select revolve. It should select the entire geometry as a whole. You could hit enter, and now it's going to ask for the start axis. So we could select this endpoint here, and I'm going to zoom out with my wheel and get to this endpoint, and you can see it's actually starting to create a revolve. Now what I do here, even though it says 360, I always just get the safe side, type in 360 and hit enter, and it should close it. And if we want, we could go over here to 2D wireframe and change it to shaded with edges. And so now we could actually see we're halfway there. Now what we want to do is we want to take these pockets and cut them through. So what we can do with this is at this point we could go to the Move gizmo. Just make sure the Move gizmo is turned on. Click on the model. And I recommend going and turn on your perpendicularity restriction cursor. So click on that. Now you could grab this red arrow here, drag it, and accurately get it to where, see there's a blue dot that you're dragging? It's in the center of the three of the crosshairs there. Get that where it actually hovers over this endpoint. Or sometimes I think it said center point. They're saying endpoint, but I think that's it. So, oops, I lost it. Let's get there again. There, I think that's an intersection. I think that's it. I'm going to go ahead and click. All right, and I think I've got it centered. If not, we could always move it. Now we want to rotate it. So in the move gizmo, go to rotate gizmo. And I know there's tricks. You could hit enter a couple times in the move gizmo, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it this way. So now this, see the green circle? Grab the green circle and it should automatically go to 90 degrees. You can just hit enter. Oh, if it didn't do it, go ahead and actually hit escape. That was my mistake. Enter is toggling it between scale. Let's go back to rotate gizmo there. Hit escape, click on rotate. Now go ahead and grab that, drag it, and I'm just going to type in 90, hit enter, and now we know it worked. Now we could go back to the move gizmo and go to the front view orientation here and drag it down. And the reason for this, instead, and it's going to stay centered, is so we could actually, I'm going to drag it down about 1.5-ish, just so it's far enough there, just away from the drawing, and we can see the drawing on the top. Now what we could do if you hit escape here is now we could take these profiles and join those and then cut them down. So go to the home button here and go to modify and find join, and you could zoom up if you need to and select these edges here and then hit enter, and it should tell you that objects were joined into one spline. That's fine. Click here, enter, enter again, select these edges here, enter, enter again to restart it, and this one. Now I could have just done one and then we could have patterned it too. I just prefer this way. Okay, so now we have, oops, we get that fixed. All right, so now that we have that geometry, we could go to extrude. Now, some of you might say, well, there's the press pull, and that you can actually do that. I noticed though it's very slow. There it is, press pull. So the extrude seems to work a little bit faster, and I don't know, it just seems to be with this particular drawing. And it might be because of the polylines or splines, but I'm going to go to extrude. And now we could select the geometry of those. Hit enter and drag them down so that you could see that they're well below the geometry, and click. And so this is what you end up with. Now go to the front view orientation, and now we want to cut those out. So if you go to zoom up like this and then go to the solid subtract, select your wheel first, click on it, it should turn blue, and then hit enter on your keyboard. And now we want to grab these. So if you go from right to left by clicking and then hover over just the base of this, try not to include the wheel, click, and it should just select those objects below. Then you could hit enter, and now we have our pockets, or our holes, through holes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put in the chamfer. So for the chamfer, we just go back to solid, and we're going to go to chamfer, and we're going to do loop and distance, type in 0.125 by 0.125. And I believe we're still on loop, so we could hover over these edges. Now, if the edges are difficult to get, click over here, make sure edge is selected, and really zooming up makes a big difference on this one. And I'm having some difficulty clicking. There we go. It's not exactly what I wanted. I'm going to hit escape there and try that one more time. So you hit enter, loop, and it should remember, actually our distance, it's not remembering. So 0.125, 0.125, enter, click on loop again, and now we should be able to get these edges. And let me turn off perpendicular, if that's it. Okay, in this case, the preview was just a little buggy, and maybe it was because I had that perpendicular on, but I'm going to hit accept. And I notice the closer usually you get to these and hover over them, sometimes you get a preview, sometimes you don't. And just make sure that little square is over the edge. Look carefully at mine as I click. And they are a bit tricky. Now, if I've tried this earlier and I rotated it to try and get all of them in one shot, it didn't work well for me. So I'm just going to do the top ones first. And I hit enter and enter. And so there's the chamfers. I'm going to rotate to the underside and hit enter again. And it should remember my settings, but you do have to hit loop again. And there, sure enough, the distance is the correct one. It just rounded it to 0.13, so that's okay. So I'm going to click on this edge, that one, this, and finally this one here. Hit enter and enter. There we have it. It's actually completed. By using the geometry from a DWG file, you could convert basically any model. Now be aware there are some where you might have to do some extending of the geometry, especially very old drawings. My first experience with AutoCAD goes back to 1986. And we didn't learn the ways that we're taught these days. They just didn't have training that was available like we have. So I picked up a lot of bad habits. Like I didn't use the snaps, and we just made it look like a drawing. We didn't necessarily close the gaps really up close. So you get a lot of boundary conditions that are open. And for solid modeling, you have to close those. So you'll probably have to use the trim or extend quite a bit on old drawings that date back to the 1980s. But for newer drawings, many people are trained better these days. And so you'll get nice, clean, watertight boundary conditions like we saw here with this drawing. So that concludes this exercise.